Turn in your Bibles to the book of Exodus. That's going to be pretty easy. Genesis, Exodus, second book of the Old Testament. Exodus chapter 3. I am full. You ever, talking about colors, have you ever seen these glasses that you try on a pair of shades and it's got a blue shade to it? And so everything you look at is blue. Everything you look at is rosy colored glasses, as they say. Well, for several weeks, I have been in this filter, if you will, that I see everything through this one thing, through this one lens, and it is our mission for 2017 that you're going to hear more about today and next Sunday, and it's about growing faith raisers in this coming year, generational faith raisers, and so everything I see now, I see through the lens of generational faith raiser. Right down to this morning, did y'all notice our ushers right here this morning? Did you notice the tall and short of the matter? You didn't? Dan and his son, he's right there. And I looked at it and thought, you know what? How old was he? How old is he? Not Dan. She looked around, I don't know. 10? So you had a 10-year-old who was ushering today, coming down here, bring up the money. Most of you would have a panic attack if you thought you had to walk down the aisle in front of everybody to come up here, and he's coming down here that way. And I thought of our older teenagers. There's 3 or 4 of them that come out here every week, and they serve in the parking lot, and they serve at the door to greet you and do that. There's 3 or 4 of them that do that, and they work with Billy. Hale's doing that, and Billy reminds me, Billy is 40, going on 70, and if you just watch the way he is, and he's energetic, but he is ever interacting with those teenagers, and Billy and those guys and 10-year-old today remind me, go back to 1973 and in 74, I was about his age. I don't remember a lot of people in the church I grew up in Florida, in Daytona. I remember a few. One of those that I remember, because I remember as a young man trying to see if I could come to church and ever catch this guy in a bad mood. Because he just seemed way over the top, like he was wearing a sun suit. You know what I mean? Like Mr. Sunshine all the time. His name was Mr. Finney. Was I get that right? Was it Finney? His name was Mr. Finney. He was the head usher at that church, and it didn't matter if it was a hurricane or sunny. It didn't matter what. He would greet you at the door with the biggest smile, and he tried to greet everybody and shake everybody's hands, and I was just a 10-year-old kid, but the way he loved on people, I've never forgotten. The way he treated people. Billy Hales does that, raising up these guys who serve in this. And so I'm just seeing everything over the last several weeks, and you're going to hear more about it, in the lens, if you will, of a generational faith raiser. How critical, how important, how easy. It's not something rocket scientist. You've seen that Papa John's pizza commercial, the newest one out right now, where he says, everybody goes, how long are you going to make pizza? And he says, well, it's not rocket scientist, it's pizza. You know, you don't have to have, well, it's the same way with raising someone's faith. You don't have to be a minister or know the Greek or Hebrew language or be a singer to raise the level of faith and grow faith in the generation of people around you, young or old. I was a young guy back then, and this elder gentleman that I didn't know it then, but I knew it as I grew up, was helping to feed the faith of a 10-year-old to get him through the next season of storms or whatever, and didn't know it. And that's what's happening here. And you've got a 10-year-old down here taking up the offering and coming down here to pray. And I thought about it, you know, one of these days, God may do other things with him and plug him into other areas. And the same thing with other kids or other. I remember at the first church, Dad preaching one Sunday, and all of a sudden, out of the middle of that service, when that service was over and he called for people to come, and I don't know how old he was, close to 80 years old, but he was about 6'9". He reminded me of Herman Munster. not in terms of the look, but in terms of how big he was. And his hands about that long. And he got up. When Dad gave the altar call, he got up and walked down there, 78 or 80 years old, and got saved. He wasn't even saved. And he got saved at 78, 80 years old. And I thought he was filled with the Spirit because he started yelling over there in the corner when the service was over. And there's a bunch of little kids around him, and he was over there just woo, woo, just carrying on. I thought, what in the world? I didn't find out until later that he was the hollering contest champion at 1 year at Spivey's Corner and was on Johnny Carson and all that kind of stuff. And he was over there, kids going up to him, yell for me. And so he's over there in the corner yelling for him, you know. 78, 80 years old, walk the aisle. It doesn't matter how old, how young you are in terms of faith raising in the next generation. I want to talk with you a little bit about that today and next Sunday. And you've got there Exodus chapter 3. I'll read in just a minute. But have you ever noticed that in many ways, television programming reflects the general attitudes or the general perceptions or the trends of society? Television programming will reflect the cultural dynamics going on across America. For instance, in 1957 to 63, you had a TV show on called Leave It to Beaver. I don't know if you remember Leave It to Beaver. But it was, and I don't mean this bad, I just mean this when I watched the episodes of it, that it was a real sappy traditional family deal, focusing on raising children and teaching them to problem solve and all that. But June and Ward were certainly not the honeymooners. They weren't Jackie Gleason, were they? And Alice. You never heard Ward say, one of these days, June. It was always sappy and pie in the sky. And I didn't grow up. Now, I remember watching reruns of it. And I remember even as a kid, my mom and dad never had a disagreement and fought in front of us. Now, she had that little Indian look that she'd give, and that wiped everything out. There wasn't no reason to talk about nothing if she gave that look. Y'all know them mama's looks? Tommy, I know you've seen them mama's looks a lot of times. But this show was like, I remember watching it as a kid going, I know good and well marriage don't work that way. Because it was never anything. She'd go back into the kitchen and figure things out. It was kind of a sappy traditional family, but it really was reflective of a time of how it was, that she was in the kitchen and the mom stayed at home and she ran the house and dad was a provider, and it was that kind of thing. Well, then later on, a little bit of overlap, another show came out called The Dick Van Dyke Show. And that was in about 61 to 66. Now, here's what the history tells you about this show, that it was an incredibly cultural changing show for one particular reason. Mary Tyler Moore, you remember her, just died recently. She and Dick Van Dyke were husband and wife. They took this show and took marriage to a different lens on this show. They began to show marriage as facing real problems. It wasn't like June and Ward. And the history of the show is that the critics say that this show altered the way culture saw marriage. They saw through the lens of this show, it was more realistic. There were disagreements. There were things that had to be worked through. It wasn't like June and Ward. It reflected the trends of the day. Then you go a little bit later, about 67 to 72, and you had a show come on called My Three Sons. Now, this show focused on single parenting. There's a shift. There's a shift in the culture. Now, you know what's interesting about this show? You think about the TV standards of the day. The TV standards of the day said, no. I was doing some reading on this. I found it very interesting. They were not about to have him be a divorced man, because society was not going to accept that. He had to be a widower. So they turned him because they felt like the TV executives of the day felt like that if they conveyed him as a divorced man, they might get criticized. Lord, don't we wish for that day? And so in that day, he was a widower raising a single, but the theme was, the underlying message was that we are presenting what is happening in culture of this time period is that more divorce is starting to creep in. Single parents is starting to be a greater issue of the day around that time. And so they wanted to address the single parent issue. So TV execs put this show together to do that. Well, guess what you think might become next? If you're following the trend of society, for about 5 years, another TV show came out in about 69 and ran through about 74, and it was called The Brady Bunch. Now, here's the thing. Some could argue, well, that show was dealing with blended families, and it was, but that's not the key to this show. The key that drove this show was divorce and remarriage. Sending the message of rebuilding life, of reconnecting and having love again and this kind of things. I'm not downplaying it. I'm just saying it was reflecting the cultural trend of the day. Now, if you want the show that talked about blended families, I got one for you. Because after this, going in through about mid-'80s was what you talking about, Willis? Anybody remember that show? 78 to 86, called Different Strokes. It was about, see how blended you can get. How much more blended can you get in this? A white, rich, elderly man and his housekeeper. He don't even have a wife. And he has a white daughter, and they adopt 2 poor black children, sending out the message culturally of the blending of families, of the tearing down of whether it's race, whether it's social background, whatever it is, tearing down those strongholds and showing that there can be a family unit. And I'm not making this bad. This what I'm about to say is a very good thing. Showing that families may come apart at the seams with dysfunction, but other families are created, that the family dynamic isn't just in that one realm. And they take that into a spiritual account. This is a family. We may not all agree. We may not all disagree. We may be from all different kinds of backgrounds, financially and socially and ethnically. And all. We may be from all those different things. But in the scriptures, this is a family in this room. Now, all of these shows reflected those cultural trends and dynamics of their time. But interestingly enough, almost during this same time period, 71 to 83. So during the time that 3 of these shows, My 3 Sons, The Brady Bunch, and Different Strokes, during the time that those 3 shows were on in that time frame, there were 2 other shows that were on that didn't reflect their time. They were set further back and did not reflect the time of the 70s and 80s. From 71 to 81, the Waltons was on TV. You remember that family? And even when Grandma in real life suffered a stroke and could not speak, they put that into the show, and she stayed a part of the show until her death, to where she couldn't do as much. And she still, and I remember watching episodes where she would mumble or wouldn't be able to move. It was literally the stroke. But how interestingly, they didn't just carve her out and cast a new grandmother. They showed in this family dynamic all of what had to be done. There were episodes where Grandma, with all of those debilitating factors, still had elements within a show showing her encouraging a grandchild, even with those setups. But 71 to 81, they weren't reflecting the values and the trends of their day, were they? They were reflecting the trends of the 30s and the 40s during the Depression and World War II. Y'all remember that? Another show that ran from 74 to 83 was Little House on the Prairie. Do you remember that? Any of you really enjoy all the little things that would happen to Nellie Olson? Well, you know, Laura Ingalls as Half Pint, just want y'all to know, she's sitting on the second row right here, Half Pint right here. The little mischievous one, my 13-year, be 14-year next week. But you remember, this show didn't reflect the culture of its day, did it? It was showing you a time long gone. That some of you would watch and you'd see the mother churning butter and it would make you quiver at the thought of churning butter. I remember the one time I churned butter as a grandkid. We showed up at my grandmother's house in Mount Olive, and she had a thing sitting over. I didn't know what it was, like a toilet plunger to me. I didn't know what it was, but it was big and wooden. I ain't never seen one that big. That was a big toilet plunger. And I remember getting up there and asking her, what is that? She goes, I'm making butter. And I remember being like a millennial. You buy it. You don't make it. No, honey, you make butter here. And I said, well, how do you do it? She showed me how to do it. She said, just sit down and do it. Boy, she was smart, wasn't she? I'm over there just churning away, and I'm like, man, this is tough. This stuff's getting thick. She's just smiling. Just keep going. And I thought, Grandma knows what she's doing. She's gotten out of doing this at 80 years old. She got me doing it. She's smart. She taught me something. I think I was the last grandchild to ever churn butter in that way. But you didn't see Little House on the Prairie or the Waltons reflecting the cultural of the early 70s and early 80s. It was showing a time long gone. And these shows reflected the values of another time, yet it resonated with families in the 70s and 80s. In fact, both of these shows actually ran longer in the wrong cultural time. They ran longer on television than any of the others I listed. These shows ran for 9 and 10 years versus the 5 and 6 years of the other shows. Now, one reason I think these two shows resonated so strongly for so long was because of a strong generational element that ran throughout the shows. You see, both of these shows had a significance about them. There was just something significant about each generation leaning on and learning from the next. These shows captured that well. They captured the significance of leaning on and learning from the generations around you. In these shows, it was not an accident. It was not a byproduct. The leaning on and learning from the generations was a centerpiece of these shows. It wasn't accidental. It was a major role playing, conveying two things. The value of the past isn't lost, shouldn't be lost because of the progressiveness of the now. And secondly, it was showing you that not only is the value of there important, but the relationships that you tied it to showed you something that took you further. But now here's what's interesting. That generational element took a back seat for most of the last 20 to 25 years. From about 86, 83 on, 86 with different strokes, 83, through the next 25 years, that generational element got lost in most TV programming. But the trend is making a comeback in the last 10 years. There's two trends I've been seeing and reading about and hearing about in the last 10 years that reflect a time past. Not all of these technological trends and all this trending on Twitter, all this kind of mess. I ain't talking about that. There's two trends from the past that I've noticed making a comeback. The first one is the generational element that we're going to talk about in a minute. You know what the second one is? I actually saw this on TV. And have been to a couple places recently saying that contractors are doing this. House builders are doing this. Can you guess at what the trend is that's coming back in the building of houses? I thought I just heard it. Front porch. Big front porches. I actually saw an interview with a builder saying that more and more of his house plans are going back to a throwback of the big, huge, wide, either wraparound or front porches. And what did the front porch represent? Family time, right? That those things, that's a trend happening in building now, is that the big, huge wraparound or the big front porches are making a comeback. Versus what we have over the last 30 years. You hear what they call them? Stoop. Well, I think it's exactly half the word right. Stupid. That I got to stoop rather than a porch. Told Tracy this, if we ever build again, if we ever build another house, it'll have a big front porch. I've always liked them. I've seen them. But now you see, every time we go through Benson to go to Sanford, we go down that main road on Benson, and we're always like, I like that house, and I like that house, and I like that house. Not that we want their houses, but we love those big, huge front porches on those old houses. So the trends are coming back. Those two in particular. Now, the generational element trend is coming back, mostly in the form of comedy. So it's not as much in the dramas. There are a couple. I'm going to share a few with you to show you that the trend of the extended family, the generational element, is coming back in TV programming. Remember now, we're talking about things that are reflecting in the culture of our day through television programming. Family Matters. Do you remember that one back in the day? Had grandma and mom and dad and neighbors who lived next door that come in and live within the house, and you had generations there that were being showed. There's some on TV now. That was an older one, but some on TV now. Dr. Ken, I don't know if any of you ever seen this one. Dr. Ken is the Asian comic doctor, and his father and mother live with him and his wife, and there's a lot of things going on with that. There's a TV show out there called Life in Pieces. And the Life in Pieces deals, and this week's episode actually dealt with, you see the little girl in the middle, this little short girl in the middle, and that's supposedly her TV mom, and behind her with a striped shirt. And Grandma and Granddaddy live right across the road. And so the little girl goes to take some things over to Grandma and Granddaddy's house. Grandma walks in and says, hey, just take this over to Granddaddy. And the mom says, no way. She cannot go outside. This is not the way. And Grandma said, I would send you to town on your bicycle, a mile on your bicycle to get milk. You won't even let her go across the road. No, not today. Kids today aren't raised like they were back then. And Grandma says, yeah, they're not got as much common sense today as they did back then. And so, they're going on. Well, Grandma and Granddaddy decide we're going to show her up. So they take her in the car, had to go to the store while Mom went to work. Take her in the car. They can't find a parking spot. Granddaddy can't find a parking spot. She says, we're not going to wait here. She gives her debit card and the list to the little 8, 9-year-old girl. Says, go in there. So the little girl goes in. You going to let me go in shopping by myself? Yes. He says, we'll just circle around. We'll just keep circling. You come out. And so she goes in, and she sees one of those little drive buggies, and she pops on the buggy, a little 10-year-old, and she's driving around, getting her groceries off the grocery list. She runs across an old man on a buggy, and she says, "Hey, can you tell me where I can get something for stools?" And he goes, "What?" So they discuss what that means, and he tells her what aisle to go. She says, "Well, you look like a man who could tell me where that would be found." And they go around, and and then some lady with her cell phone, "Oh, I got to call your mama. You in here shopping by yourself. We don't do that nowadays." A big old to-do. When they get home and the mom's upset with the little girl and grandma, she pulls out all the groceries, and she goes, "You bought all these by yourself?" "Yeah." "You knew what to get?" "Yeah." "Here, why don't you take grandma her groceries across the road?" The whole episode dealt with the generational dynamic that goes on between the past and the present, and the lesson that's taught. Now, I didn't mean to get into all that, but it was just there. There's another TV show called Blackish. I don't remember if you've seen this one. It's a funny comedy show, and it deals with grandpa living with them and all that kind of stuff. And then the show that you all have heard me talk about before, Blue Bloods. And then you have Blue Bloods, where there's, and in almost every single episode of this law enforcement drama with Tom Selleck and these others, there's almost every single episode that I can ever remember watching a family dinner to either close out the show of some sort, talking about the dialogue of the growing of each generation and in the involvement of each generation. A powerful thing. All of these have that generational element to it. And it is used part of the leaning and learning experience that you find. Now, here's a disclaimer I need to tell you. I don't agree with or support all of what any of these shows may portray from week to week. I don't support all that. Remember, they're also reflecting some other dynamics of our time. I'm just sharing you the cultural trend reemerging today in television program about generational things. Why is that key to us? Why should we as the body of Christ understand the significance of the generational element? Well, let me read you your verse of Scripture. In Exodus chapter 3, verse 15. Now, this is where God has introduced himself to Moses in the burning bush and introduced himself as I am. So this is later in the conversation when God is speaking through that episode with Moses. So in verse 15, he says this, "And God furthermore said to Moses, Thus you shall say to the sons of Israel, The Lord, the God of your fathers, the God of Abraham, the God of Isaac, and the God of Jacob, has sent me to you. This is my name forever, and this is my memorial name to all generations." To all generations. Now remember, chapter 3 of Exodus holds the story of the burning bush. And it is in this experience that we're just talking about that God introduces himself to Moses as the God of your fathers. Moses didn't know him by that name. Come on now. Think back. Moses didn't know his daddy. Moses grew up in a time when Pharaoh sought to kill all the boys. His mother put him in a basket, sent him down the river, and Pharaoh's daughter found him. He was a foster kid. He was an adopted kid by Pharaoh who showed the lines of adoption because when Moses broke the law, his own adopted father turned on him and sent for him to be arrested and killed. Moses didn't know his daddy. God introduces himself to Moses as his daddy. For he says, "For I am the God of your fathers, Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob." And in verse 15, he's letting him know when he says that I am the God, not only the God of generations, but I am the God for generations. And in verse 15, the Lord tells Moses that his name is not just something to know. Hi, nice to meet you. I am not just someone to know in name. It is my memorial name. Well, that means you're dead, because memorial is a thing about dead. No, 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 no. Memorials are not about who has died. What is the root word of memorial? Memory. A memorial is not a symbol of death. A memorial is the symbol of remembrance. Of remembrance. And if you were to go into Exodus and study its back language and understand the backdrop of it, it would simply mean that what God was saying is that mine is a name to remember. That I am to be remembered in every generation of the miracles and of the ways that I interact with all generations. My name is a record. It is a record, meaning this: that which is to be passed on, that which is to be taught, that which is to be told, that which is to be learned about from one generation to the next. You go to family reunions. I don't know about yours, but over the years, ours would become this. To me, it's a little bit disheartening, because all of the folks that would do this, we have, on my dad's side of the family, we have two of my grandma, his brother, he and his brother, the only ones still with us, and then three in-laws, three aunts, and my mom, out of about 16, 18. But I remember growing up for years, going to the reunions. Some of y'all know what I'm talking about. And they would begin to tell stories about when they were kids. And they would begin to talk about different things. And they would share those stories. And in those stories, there were values. In those stories, there were records to be remembered. There were things to be passed on. And Moses is saying here, God is telling Moses, I am he who extends families from one generation to the next. I am the God of generations and the God for generations. Let me give you a little biblical history. In the Old Testament, throughout the Old Testament, you will find this. You will find that there is a described function of the family. There was a described function of the extended families. As a matter of fact, in Mary and Joseph's day, this was still the case. What they intended to do was they would build, mom and pop would build a little hut, a little mortar and mud house. When their kids grew up and married, they added on to that house and added on. And so the whole family unit, they would continue to add on to the houses, and they would all live in that unit, however many rooms it had. You reflect that in the Waltons. You reflect that riding down the road here. You can ride down the road. I forgot who owned it. I know a school teacher of mine back in the day, Miss Herring, used to own it or grew up in it. But if you're going down there, you're going to turn on Buck Swamp Road, and there's that big, huge farmhouse right there on the right where you turn on Buck Swamp Road. I don't know who owns it now. But if you look at the size of that house and the size of those rooms, it's the same concept from the Old Testament and from the New Testament, to where you build big room houses for all the family to live together. And in the Old Testament, the extended family, the generational family, had functions. These were not subtle. These were not, oh, well, this just happens. These were taught, they were learned, they were demanded, they were required. Here where the functions are. First one was to provide for its own perpetuation. In other words, to continue teaching the values and the memories and the heritage and the close relationships. over and over and over, particularly in Deuteronomy, that you'll find out in a minute. Over and over, God will tell them, teach the kids this, teach your child this, teach the aliens this, teach them this. Why? Why do we need to teach them all of this, God? So that when the day comes that they ask why, you can tell them about me. That I am the God of generations, and I am the God for generations. And so one of the functions of the extended family in the Old Testament was to provide for its own continuation, not just of that family then, but when that family passed on, that someone grew up knowing what to do and how to do it, and how important those relationships were. And the second one was to maintain an atmosphere of emotional warmth and stability for raising each generation. Oh, Jesus, help me. I could go a lot of places. You see, to me, when I first read that, I thought it makes sense. It makes sense why the enemy likes to come in the side doors of every church and create strife and create discord and finally let that fester into division. Because what will happen? It will destroy the atmosphere of warmth and stability of raising the next generation of spiritual values and of faith if I can get the church warring rather than worshiping together. If I can get the discord stirred up enough, if I can get the strife stirred up enough, I can get the division. I'm just going to tell you something. You know what strife is? Strife is simply the seed of a demonic spirit. You need to go read the scriptures. You'll find it out. Strife is not, well, I don't like the way you do this and I don't like the way that I do that. That's disagreement. We can disagree. Strife takes it deeper because strife seeks disagreement rather than agreement. And as it grows and festers, it is of a demonic spirit. And yet, in the Old Testament, one of the main functions of the total extended family, so everybody, grandmama, granddaddy, aunts, uncles, everybody had the role of maintaining the atmosphere of emotional warmth and stability for raising the next generation. Think about it. If we can have so much war and biting and strife and division and discord here, do you think your children, as they grow up, want to come to church here? Some of them won't even go to church anymore. You know them, I know them. Too many people who grew up in a church where they were so wounded and so hurt that now they don't even attend church. What has been lost? The warmth and the stability of making sure everybody playing a role in doing that. Devin, if you and Pam want to come and just get ready, but I got a little bit more to do. The generational element of raising faith is critical. You know what I see in this church? The more God gives me insight about this mission for 2017, you know our vision. The mission is with inside the vision. And so here's what I see. I see that the mission of us raising generational faith raisers, growing generational faith raisers in this church, I see it so critical that it's like an incubator. That as we develop and grow and connect to one another, raising up each other in our faith, strengthening each other, equipping each other in all the ways that we're going to talk about next Sunday. And every generation plays a part, that it's like an incubator. And as things grow to a certain place in that, it breaks out of the shell. And the vision becomes a reality. And as then the vision of this house serves as a second incubator, and all of a sudden, as it breaks out of its shell, it impacts the local community in all the ways that we do. Oh, listen to me. They're out of Egypt, wandering in the desert, and God is developing them as a people. And he begins to lay out the elements of family Listen to how he does this. I'm going to read a couple places for you. In Deuteronomy chapter 4, verses 9 and 10, listen to what God is telling his people. He is implanting in them the structure for generational faith raisers. Listen to what he says. Verse 9, only give heed to yourself and keep your soul diligently, lest you forget the things which your eyes have seen. Remember, they came out of Egypt. They saw all the plagues. They saw the Red Sea parted. They saw the manna cup. They've seen all of this. He's speaking to one generation. Lest they, which your eyes have seen, lest they depart from your heart, you fail to remember them anymore, all the days of your life, and make them known to your sons and your grandsons, or your children and your grandchildren. He says, make them known. Then all of a sudden, if you look at that very verse, 9 and 10, look at the phrases there. Keep your soul diligent. Make them known to your sons and grandsons. Remember, assemble the people, all generations. Teach the children. All of those things are the extended family function of maintaining the atmosphere to raise and grow the faith. Go over to chapter 6 real quickly. Go over to chapter 6, and then let me read to them again. Now, the last one I just read, he's talking about you older folks. I ain't there yet. You older folks. He's saying, you need to remember, and you need to tread your heart diligently, keep it sharp diligently, so that you don't forget. So that then you can teach them to your grandkids. He's talking to the older generation. Okay? Now all of a sudden, he takes it a little more specific. Listen to this. In chapter 6, verses 6 through 9. And these words which I am commanding you today shall be on your hearts. And you shall teach them diligently to your sons. Listen now. Now last time he just said teach them. Now look at where he says teach them. And shall talk of them when you sit in your house, when you walk by the way, when you lie down, when you rise up. And you shall bind them as signs on your hand, and they shall be as frontals or things on your head, front head, for your forehead. And you shall write them on your doorpost of your house, and you shall keep them on your gates. He's saying all throughout your house, you should be raising up the faith of the next generation. Why do we want to do that? Oh, skip over to Deuteronomy 7. Deuteronomy 7, when he talks about all the things that you do there. He's giving you the backdrop. Past generations, older generations, don't lose sight of what I did for you. Don't lose sight of how God manifests himself to you. And then the parent generation, teach them when you're doing this, that, and the other. All within the house. And here's why. Chapter 7, verses 12 and 13. For then it shall come to pass, because you listened, and the word listened there doesn't mean that you just heard. It means that you embraced and you lived out. And so, because you listen to these judgments and keep them and do them, that the Lord your God will keep with you his covenant of loving kindness, which he swore to your forefathers. And he will love you and bless you and multiply you. He will also bless the fruit of your womb, the next generation, and the fruit of your ground, whatever you're doing. Your grain and your new wine and your oil, the increase of your herd and the young of your flock, and in the land which he swore to your forefathers to give you. Did you hear that? Listen to the generations. Listen to the generational concept. Listen to me, folks. Not just with humanity. Listen. He will bless the fruit of your womb, your children to come, and the fruit of your ground, things that you've not even planted yet, and your grain and your new wine and new oil, things to come, and the increase of your herds and the young of your flock. God, again, is telling them, I am the God of generations and the God for generations. And not only if you will remember and you will teach it and you will live it and you will be it, a faith raiser to those around you, what will happen is those seeds will go beyond just your kids. It will go into the very ground and into the very occupation that you have. When I read that, I remember the story that my dad has told, and I've told it here before, of the word that came to my grandfather, that he would give him a place of his own one day, to where from the fruit of the ground, his children and his grandchildren and friends and family would still feed from. In that little old 40, 50 acre plot right down there in Mount Olive, that man's been gone to heaven since 1980. And yet there are people continuing to eat from the ground. A God of generations for generations. It's important that we understand that. It's important that we know that. Oh, you're not getting it. You don't care. Play us something softly. I told you I'm hearing this in everything I see and read and do. And it's God's way of affirming for me to press in on us becoming generational faith raisers in this church this year. The criticalness of it. So last week was National Signing Day in football, where all these high school players were signing. And I came across an article about a young man who declared his intentions to play football for NC State in the coming year. His signing, his declaring of his intent to play was different than anyone I'd ever come across. Some guys were just showing up on their Twitter or on their Facebook, or some guys would throw a hat on real quick to show who they were going to sign with as a surprise. They come up with all kinds of gimmicks. This one bowled me over. I want to read it to you. What this young man did. Grandmothers are special people in the lives of their grandchildren. That was true for Heritage High School junior running back Ricky Pearson. Quote, my grandma was like a mother to me. I remember one time when I was a little kid, I used to call my grandmama right before I went to school. Grandmama, I'm coming over to get a sausage biscuit. And she'd laugh, okay, baby. I got them hot and ready for you. And I used to run over there. Person said his grandmother was like a second mom to him. And earlier this month, Pearson's grandmother lost her battle with cancer. She had slipped into a coma while in the hospital, and the family rushed to be by her side. Listen, I was having a conversation with my family about what school I wanted to go to when we got a phone call. So we rushed to my aunt's house, person remembered. Her blood pressure was dropping, and they knew time was short. The nurse come over to me and said, something is holding on to your grandmama, keeping her alive because she's fighting. That's when I knew. He said, I went into the hospital room to talk with her. I was in the room talking to my grandmama, and I was crying. And I said, Grandma, I'm going to make you happy. Listen, I'm going to be the best person you raised me to be. Come on now. I don't know who his grandmama was, but I think his grandmama was a praying grandmama. It might just be my soft heart, but that's just what I think. Because I don't know of any selfish, hard-hearted person out there raising somebody else to be the best they can be. You got to be able to show it in how you live, right? Grandmama, I'm going to make you happy. I'm going to be the best person you raised me to be. And I said, Grandmama, I'm going to go to state. I'm going to make you happy. That was the first time that person had announced his commitment to NC State. The coaches didn't even know. He said it was real emotional moment for me. My grandmama played a big impact on me picking state. So I just wanted to make her happy by committing to state because that's what I promised her I was going to do. That's all well and good. But the number one line I kept zeroing in on wasn't, Grandmama, I'm going to make you happy because I'm going to go to state. It was, Grandmama, I'm going to make you happy because I'm going to grow up to be the best person you raised me to be. That is a generational faith raiser. That's a grandmama who saw beyond the fears and the failures and the divisiveness of a culture, and she saw things that were eternal, that lasted forever. I don't know it. I'm going to weave the stories together. May not be true, but I'm going to weave it together in my own mind. I just have to believe that when God introduced himself to Moses, it was the same way that Grandmama knew him. For I am the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. I am the God who gave promises to your generation before you, and he gave promises to this generation, and I intend to keep my relationship of covenant with you, Grandmama. And I believe Grandmama knew it. Pulled through my own family history and found where I'd forgotten I'd done it, but I had written out our stories for all of my kids to know. Forgotten I'd put a little thing together. So I was just flipping through it, and I found the last paragraph I had totally forgotten about, but I want to share it with you. There are many other stories I intend to add to this collection of Whitfield memories, stories that include many other family members who've gone on. For now, I hope you have been encouraged to dust off your memories and put them on paper. Without your memories shared, the Whitfield story is incomplete. And I wrote this. We may know most of the facts regarding dates and marriages and names of children and deaths, but we're missing the stories that bring those things to life and reveal the values and legacies of our family. This is our story, and it should be passed on to our children. Our God is a God of generations. Our family story is a story of the generations of favor, the generations of blessing of our God on our family. It's one that should be remembered and should be told. Deuteronomy 6, tell them. Tell them. In those two things that I've read, did you hear the generational element? Growing generational faith raisers is a powerful responsibility that all of us have. All of us. And I know that our mission for 2017 is to engage us all to do our part, to do what we can, to do all we can. Not just the next generation, but for our generation today. Because there are just as many people our age who live in darkness or who've lived life not saved yet, or, as he told him, in Deuteronomy, they have forgotten the God of generations. Stand with me. I truly believe the more that God teaches me, the more that God reveals to me, the more that God involves me in His plan, I truly believe two things. First, I don't know it all, and I don't know how to do it all. Secondly, what I do have, what I do know, what I have lived, what I have experienced should be shared, that others may know the God of my father and my grandfather is still the God for my children. And I have been telling you this, and we'll tell you this again next Sunday with some specifics of showing you what that 65 and older generation, how important you are, of the parent generation, how critical you are, and the millennial, the next young generation, how vital you are to carrying forth the covenant of God to transform this world for His kingdom. We all have a part to play. None of us are irrelevant, no matter our age. And God, that most powerful thing He's teaching me, it's seismic. It's like an earthquake. That's the only way I can describe it. In me, it's like it's seismic. It's like it's an earthquake. That what He is asking us to do, becoming generational faith raisers in 2017, will shake the roots of people. This is not about church. This is about the releasing of the power of the Holy Spirit from the gospel of Jesus Christ. This is not about music. This is about the person of Jesus Christ and how critical teaching our kids about who He is and us living it out, who He is in us, will shake the foundations of homes and communities. To God be the glory. For great things He has done, and great things He will